Psalm 10 wrestles with some of the deepest and most difficult questions we will ever have to encounter, from despair over God's apparent silence or absence, through to a vivid description of the wickedness of the world that seems to go on unchecked, to the point where the psalmist is driven to his knees and cries out for God to intervene. And finally, we arrive at a renewed declaration of confidence in God's justice, trusting that God will do what is right. This psalm speaks directly to one of the more challenging aspects of the human experience. How do we maintain trust in God's goodness towards us and his power to help us when evil seems to triumph and God seems so slow to respond? Why, Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? The psalmist paints a disturbing portrait of the wicked people who seem to prosper in this world. This is not just about evil behavior, but evil desires and evil motives. We're told here of the kind of thought patterns and internal monologues that some of these evil people have as they cause the suffering of others and delight in what they do. In verses 2 and 3, we see that the wicked actively hunt down those who are vulnerable. The depraved desires of his heart cause him to boast and to glory in his own evil. There is a chilling self-confidence to this kind of a character. He says to himself, verse 6, "Nothing will ever shake me." He swears, "No one will ever do me harm." They have great prosperity, and their prosperity fuels their pride. Godly people, by contrast, are supposed to see all the gifts that God has given and be grateful and humble. That is the opposite of what's happening here. These kinds of wicked people live lives of extraordinary abundance, and far from being grateful or seeking to bless others with their many gifts, they are puffed up with pride and look down upon others, believing that nothing and no one can stop them. The arrogance of the evil person is not limited to his interactions with other people, but he turns that same disdain upon the divine, upon God. He says to himself, God will never notice. He covers his face and never sees. You know, there are leaders who rise up throughout human history and stand upon the world stage who seem to fit this description almost exactly. We could give dozens of examples of people who carried themselves as though even God could not bring them low. Think of Muammar Gaddafi, for example, a man who had a fleet of luxury cars, a man who had extravagant palaces, a man who had absolutely enormous power, and his regime was marked by the torture of others and arbitrary executions. See this description here. His eyes watch in secret for his victims. Like a lion in cover, he lies in wait. Arrogant and evil. And yet, did you see? His regime fell almost overnight. He was eventually dragged out of his hiding place by his own people, attacked by a mob, killed on camera while begging for his life. All earthly control crumbles quickly. And there are endless examples of others who fit this exact same mold, who committed truly unspeakable atrocities against others and seemed to consider themselves untouchable, and yet they were brought low. Arise, Lord, the psalmist says. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. David is right here when he calls for God to intervene, even in dramatic fashion. He says, verse 15, break the arm of the wicked man and call the evildoer to account for his wickedness. You know, we live in an era where these kinds of atrocities are seen and documented, and the information can be easily shared around the world. But think of the number of things that have gone on throughout human history that nobody knows about, where no survivor can tell what they have seen. Well, this psalm rightly points out that God sees, he knows, he will call the evil to account. And so the psalm ends with a powerful declaration. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You, Lord, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere earthly mortals will never again strike terror. This is the foundation of our hope, that God, the true King, remains upon the throne. Our cries for his compassion do not fall on deaf ears. The same God who seemed to be distant back in verse 1 is seen to be carefully listening to the cries of his people in the end. And here we see that the evil of the world will not get away with it. I think this is a psalm that will mean more to those who are suffering at the hands of evil people than it will to those whose lives are ticking along quite nicely. There are people all over the world right now who will read Psalm 10 and rejoice in the fact that God has the power to break the arm of the evil one, violent though that sounds, because that evil arm is pulling on levers that lead to enormous suffering. While the vulnerable suffer and they may ask what can be done in response, well, Psalm 10 tells us that the response is not resignation, but redoubling our commitment to persistently pray for God to intervene and to faithfully live in the meantime, not as those who are wicked, but as those who are righteous. When God seems silent or distant, the truth is that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. He listens to the lament of his people, and according to his timing, he will intervene on their behalf.